Welcome back to HQ, presented by Enterprise. Dennis Dodd's latest power rankings are out. As you take a look at the top 25, according to Dennis, Georgia remains number 1. Michigan overtakes Ohio State into the 2 spots. Buckeyes falling 1. Also on the move, Louisville up 2 spots into the top 10, with Ole Miss falling to 13, and Oregon State also up a couple of places, with Penn State falling down to 15. Let's get into the latest edition of the Power Rankings with the author, Dennis Dodd, and Cover 3 podcast host, Chip Patterson, who's here to react to some of these placements. Let's start with the team that everyone's talking about, for better or for worse, Dennis. Michigan. They passed their first big test and jump up to number 2.
Yeah, let's talk some football. How about that? No, I jumped them up there because out of the top 4, not including Washington, Ohio State probably has the least complete team. I know we're splitting hairs in the top 4. They're in the playoff, absolutely, at this point. But Michigan, the first time they played a living, breathing opponent all season, and look, we can have this discussion, but they were without their coach. They had their offensive coordinator calling plays, and he chose to call the last 32 plays as runs. It was almost coaching like Jim Harbaugh was in his ear. Just take this and get out of here. It wasn't impressive offensively. They still have maybe the best defense in the country. Penn State played along with that as long as they could. They're not a fully formed team either, but I just like the way Michigan's constructed. Blake Corum obviously was over 100 yards in this game. He was a Heisman finalist until he hurt his knee last year. I don't know if he was coaching scared or it was just a bold move to have J.J. McCarthy throw 8 times in that game. I think they could have gone downfield more, but look, if they keep winning, they're going to be in there. And for this week, I'm going to reward the Wolverines.
Sometimes it is physics and not football, and Michigan had 2,200 pounds of beef. And I love Sharon Moore, the offensive line coach, who decided, I'm looking at a Penn State pass rush that is really causing problems for J.J. McCarthy. So what are we going to do? We're going to trot out the beef. 6, 7 offensive linemen. We're going to mash you at the point of attack. It was old school. It was, and Dennis mentioned it seemed like Jim Harbaugh was in his ear. It looked like we were putting on old Stanford tape from the way that Harbaugh and David Shaw got that program up and rolling and into BCS bowl games. So you didn't throw because you didn't need to, because you were doing such a good job of blowing Penn State off the ball and then using that dynamic combination of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. And I just think Michigan's been so impressive. Interesting note, though, Michigan for 5 weeks was the number 1 team in our CBS Sports 133. But this week, Georgia takes over number 1 for the first time since early October. So the CBS 133 and the Dennis Dodd Power Rankings agree. Georgia 1, Michigan 2.
Oh, well, interesting. And certainly for Michigan, I mean, Blake Corum, that photo of him after the game with the blood streaming down his face. If I'm Michigan fans, I'm putting that in black and white and posting that all over the place. That was a tough running win. By the way, Michigan this week taking on Maryland. They are 19.5-point favorites as of Monday. All right, since losing to Texas in week 2, Dennis, all Alabama has done is win. They're in the SEC title game. Jalen Milroe is now in the Heisman conversation, but they remain number 8. Dennis, are you not entertained?
Well, you can't move them up. They're stuck. The team that beat them head-to-head was still the most impressive win this season, and I would say by far, is Texas at number 7. Oregon is at number 6. I think they're having a better season than Alabama right now. We can have a discussion about that, but all this is going to play out. And then Washington's still undefeated at number 5. So Alabama had a really impressive win against Kentucky. But look, they're stuck, and I would suspect you're going to see that in the CFP rankings Tuesday night. There's not enough room to move them up, because if you move them up past Texas, well, that's against the laws of nature and man at this point. I don't necessarily believe in the transitive property of poll ranking, which means I beat you, so I'm ahead of you. But this is different. Texas beat them. They beat them handily, I would say. I was at the game, and that still stands out as the best win. And there's going to be I don't know what the thing is coming forward, but there's going to be heck to pay if Alabama gets in and Texas doesn't. If they both win out, I don't see any scenario where that happens. It's almost, if they keep winning, both of them have to get in, or Texas has to get in. Watch that one.
Oh, I'm going to violate these laws, Dennis. I'm sorry, but these are power rankings, and the team that has been more powerful is the Alabama Crimson Tide. So take that week 2 result and let's throw it out, because everything that we've looked at from these two teams recently, Texas is sitting there playing with its food. We get Quinn Ewers back, and we're still on upset alert at TCU. Alabama has been taking care of business, and I understand for the playoff committee, which is looking at resumes and trying to factor in head-to-head as one of their 4 principles in an intentionally vague process. But for power rankings, I think that Alabama, you could argue, should be the top 1-loss team. I love what this Crimson Tide team has evolved into. I credit Nick Saban, the greatest of all time, for being able to realize that this group, which is imperfect and limited, they are so committed to trying to improve. They're going to do what they do and do it well, and that is good enough to absolutely run through and pass all the opponents that are left on the schedule. If Alabama and Texas met tomorrow, I'd be taking Alabama 10 times out of 10.
Wow, okay. So Chip, not happy with Alabama sitting at 8. By the way, this week Crimson Tide get Chattanooga, who they will more than likely boat race before, of course, wrapping up against Iron Bowl, and then Georgia in the SEC title game. One team that did make a nice jump this week in the power rankings, North Carolina up 5 spots from 19 to 14 with a win over Duke in double overtime. That's a big jump for an OT win, Dennis.
It's a big jump, but you have to look at the power rankings. Right now, they're the 5th best 2-loss team on that list. Only Penn State is lower, and we're going to discuss them at number 15. So I'm not going to make a case for North Carolina. They're LSU junior. Offensively, they're not very good defensively. They should have handled Duke without its quarterback. In a wounded situation, they gave up 45 points. I know it was in overtime. Some of that is because of that. But look, maybe it's the Mac Brown factor. We all like Mac Brown. Is North Carolina going to finish up there? Yeah, they might. At the end of the year, they're sitting there looking at a 10-win team, whether they, bowl or no bowl win or no bowl win. It looks like this is going to be another 10-win team for Mac Brown at age 72. So I'm willing to throw him a bone. It was nothing more than that.
Yeah, anytime that you can beat 6-4 Duke, it's on its 3rd-string quarterback and future hedge fund manager Grayson Loftus out there. Anytime that you can take down a juggernaut like that, you're going to see a big spike in the rankings. North Carolina has 2 wins against teams with a winning record: 6-4 Duke, 6-4 Miami. It is very, very good offensively. I like the LSU comparison that Dennis has there, but I might take some 3-loss teams ahead of the Tar Heels right now. And this is coming from somebody who graduated from North Carolina. I just think that defense has not taken the steps forward that we thought at the beginning of the season.
Chip, I love that you're bringing the reaction pod energy to the Monday edition of HQ. Lastly, let's talk about the team that Michigan beat, Penn State. Dennis, you alluded to it. They fall to 15. So hang on. An unranked win moves you up 5 spots, and a ranked loss drops you 5 spots. I kind of have some questions about that, but this does seem about right.
Yeah, it does. Don't get me started about Penn State. You just got me started about Penn State. Who have they beat? And don't get me started about Iowa, because that's their best win. And Iowa somehow snuck into the AP poll. I think they paid somebody this week. So, no, their offense less. Drew Aller's progress hasn't been progress. The defense is very, very good. We know that. But this team has no business being around the top 10, probably not the top 15. And they've got some profound issues at Penn State if they're going to compete in that league in the future, where it's going to get tough with those 4 teams from the West Coast. You can't just hope for November games at Beaver Stadium, hope the weather is such that you can just slug games out like they tried to do with Michigan. It's going to be different. We'll see those guys out on the West Coast. They're going to have to recruit different. They're going to have to get better at quarterback. I'm really down on Penn State. We could go 20 more minutes on James Franklin's record against ranked teams, but I think we all know what it is.
Yeah, this is one where I sent my notes in, Dennis, full disclosure, and I said perfect ranking. because making that adjustment is finally being able to bring some clarity to a group that has not fulfilled the expectations. You go into the transfer portal and you get a player like Dante Cephas, who had many of the top programs trying to get him to come on board, and it wasn't the magic elixir that so many thought. You know, Drew Aller comes in. Well, now the offense is going to take off. Just incredibly disappointed on a lot of different levels. The talent on this roster, especially on the defensive side, is so high that I worry that as a Penn State fan, you're going to look back at this and wonder if this was one of those we could have had them, right? Last year, you beat everybody on your schedule, not named Ohio State and Michigan. This year, you beat everybody on your schedule, not named Ohio State and Michigan. Sometimes that's a credit to Ohio State and Michigan. Other times, you need to realize that the reason why you're not breaking through the ceiling, it's internal. So I like the readjustment from Dennis here on the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, the offensive coordinator paying the price for that loss against Michigan, and a lot of people now asking, has James Franklin taken this team really just as far as he could? Thanks to college football writer Dennis Dodd, Cover 3 podcast host Chip Patterson, chiming in. Dennis's latest power rankings available for you over on CBSSports.com. And I want to tell you about the Cover 3 podcast, latest episode, a little emergency pod regarding Jimbo Fisher's firing and what is next for the Aggies. And by the way, if you haven't already, check out the reaction pod from all the action on Saturday. It's fantastic stuff with Chip and the gang. Download and follow the Cover 3 wherever you get your podcasts.